Israel's oral argument, South Africa versus Israel at UN International Court of Justice public hearings. We are not going through this entire thing, as was the case, by the way, with the previous video, which went over the opening arguments by South Africa to the case that Israel is committing a genocide. Correct arguments, by the way, divinely correct. Even the Pope, who you might remember has papal infallibility, has condemned Israel for their bombings. So, I mean, that answers it right there. I don't know what to say. But with regards to this, as was the case with South Africa, past a point you understand the arguments. I feel my role in this isn't to analyze. We're literally going over the arguments made by legal teams at the International Court of Justice. There's a limit to how much I can add to that. Though I imagine in this case I'm going to be sort of indignantly raging against a lot of stuff that the Israel's case makes. We're not going to watch the whole thing. If you want to watch the entirety of it, you should look it up on YouTube. It's pretty easy to find. Let me get this up. We have the Chain Man here, yet again. The guy defending Israel, Malcolm Shaw, also defended Azerbaijan when they were ethnically cleansing Nagorno-Karabakh. Recently? Like the most recent cleansing, or are you referring to a previous conflict?
The court meets this morning to hear the State of Israel present its single round of oral argument.
Get ratioed in the dislikes. Let's go.
On the request for the indication of provisional measures submitted by the Republic of South Africa on 29 December 2023 in the case concerning...
I'm going to speed it up by 10% because I don't respect Israel or their arguments.
Application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip, South Africa versus Israel. I shall now give the floor to the co-agent of Israel, Mr. Tal Becker. You have the floor, Excellency.
Madam President, distinguished members of the Court, it is an honor to appear before you again on behalf of the State of Israel. The State of Israel is singularly aware of why the Genocide Convention, which has been invoked in these proceedings, was adopted. Seared in our collective memory is the systematic murder of 6 million Jews.
Literally the opening, literally right off the not like a joke answer. Hey, it's a 3-hour presentation by a legal team at the International Court of Justice. What's the very first? Okay, I should have made a bingo board. Jesus Christ.
As part of a premeditated and heinous program for their total annihilation. Given the Jewish people's history and its foundational texts, it is not surprising that Israel was among the first states to ratify the Genocide Convention without reservation and to incorporate its provisions in its domestic legislation.
I don't want to do all this. It's just, okay.
For some, the promise of never again for all peoples is a slogan. For Israel, it is the highest moral obligation.
Mm-hmm.
Raphael Lemkin, a Polish Jew who witnessed the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust, is credited with coining the term genocide. He helped the world recognize that the existing legal lexicon was simply inadequate to capture the devastating evil that the Nazi Holocaust unleashed. The applicant has now sought to invoke this term in the context of Israel's conduct in a war it did not start and did not want. A war in which Israel is defending itself against Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other terrorist organizations whose brutality knows no bounds.
Notice how this has literally nothing to do with the claim whatsoever. The claim is you're committing genocide. Whether or not you started the conflict or wanted the conflict or anything, it's completely irrelevant.
Suffering in this war, like in all wars, is tragic. It is heartbreaking. The harsh realities of the current...
Hear that fake voice waver?
It is heartbreaking.
You're right there. Did you hear that? Sorry, I doubt the sincere, I guess, emotional involvement of a person on here to defend his country against charges of genocide. Well, is it his country? No, this guy's British, so no.
The harsh realities of the current hostilities are made especially agonizing for civilians, given Hamas's reprehensible strategy of seeking to maximize civilian harm to both Israelis and Palestinians, even as Israel seeks to minimize it. But as this court has already made clear, the Genocide Convention was not designed to address the brutal impact of intensive hostilities on the civilian population, even when the use of force raises, quote, very serious issues of international law and involves enormous suffering and continuing loss of life, end quote. The Convention was set apart to address a malevolent crime of the most exceptional severity. We live at a time when words are cheap. In an age of social media and identity politics, the temptation to reach for the most outrageous term, to vilify...
Remarkable. It literally is just going... It's literally just going to be like arguing with a collective hive mind of Zionists on Twitter. It's literally going to be the exact same... bingo. Yeah, bingo. I don't have the bingo sheet in front of me, but bingo probably... How many minutes in are we? Because I almost have holy shit, dude. Literally, like every... I mean, I guess this is to be expected, I suppose, because there's not going to be any real effort at making legal arguments here. Remember, apparently the International Court of Justice is still deliberating a sincere complaint filed by Israel's group as to whether or not South Africa even has the right to bring this charge of genocide against Israel despite uninvolvement, even though the last time genocide was put on trial in the International Court of Justice, it was brought by the Gambia successfully against Myanmar. So the very last time they did this indicated you can be an uninvolved country and still file this charge. But now they're like wasting time on this now.
And demonize has become for many irresistible.
I said the Gambia.
But if there is a place where words should still matter, where truth should still matter, it is surely a court of law. The applicant has regrettably put before the court a profoundly distorted factual and legal picture. The entirety of its case hinges on a deliberately curated, decontextualized, and manipulative description of the reality of current hostilities. South Africa purports to come to this court in the lofty position of a guardian of the interest of humanity. But in delegitimizing Israel's 75-year existence in its opening presentation yesterday...
By referring to the Nakba. Zionists consider it to be like anti-Semitic to point out the Nakba, the thing that objectively happened that they did.
That broad commitment to humanity rang hollow. And in its sweeping counterfactual description of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it seemed to erase both Jewish history and any Palestinian agency or responsibility.
See, the Palestinians actually asked for the Nakba. Oh, speaking of, Lonerbox recently put out a really great video responding to, I think the YouTube channel's name is Traveling Israeli, where Lonerbox went into like the details and some of the like nitty-gritty historical facts of sort of like early Zionist Arab conflicts. It's interesting. You should watch it.
Indeed, the delegitimization of Israel since its very establishment in 1948 in the applicant's submissions sounded barely distinguishable from Hamas's own rejectionist rhetoric.
There you go. Anyone got a bingo yet? Yep. Saying the Nakba happened is being Hamas. It's like being Hamas. You're Hamas now. Bingo. Woo! Can you imagine watching all 3 hours of this? Glad I'm not that crazy.
It is unsurprising, therefore, that in the applicant's telling, both Hamas's responsibility for the situation in Gaza and the very humanity of its Israeli victims are removed from view. The attempt to weaponize the term genocide against Israel in the present context does more than tell the court a grossly distorted story.
That was a lot of fancy words the South African people brought, but I didn't hear no condemnations of Hamas and all that fancy talk.
And it does more than empty the word of its unique force and special meaning. It subverts the object and purpose of the convention itself.
Speed it up, please. Sure, 1.2.
With ramifications for all states seeking to defend themselves against those who demonstrate total disdain for life and for the law.
Palestinian babies.
Madam President, members of the court, on Saturday, October 7th, a Jewish religious holiday, thousands of Hamas and other militants breached Israeli sovereign territory.
Really? I
by
hadn't
sea,
heard about it.
Land and air, invading over 20 Israeli communities, bases, and the site of a music festival. What proceeded, under the cover of thousands of rockets fired indiscriminately into Israel, was the wholesale massacre, mutilation, and abduction of as many citizens as the terrorists could find before Israel's forces repelled them. Openly displaying elation, they tortured children in front of parents and parents in front of children, burned people, including infants, alive, and systematically raped and mutilated scores of women, men, and children. All told, some 1,200.
Remembering how we don't have a full knowledge of how many Israeli civilians were killed by the IDF because the IDF engaged in a panicked crossfire and fired shells into areas occupied by Hamas without fully knowing whether or not there were hostages present. Meaning it's very possible that some number, almost certainly some, possibly significant number of Israeli civilians were directly killed by the IDF. And then they cleared up all those burnt up cars and moved them, almost like to make it harder to, I don't know, take a look at the attack site. I don't know. Don't get me wrong, the whole thing is still the whole thing is still 100% Hamas's fault. If you attack a country and kill a bunch of civilians and, like, in the crossfire more die, that's still the fault of the terrorists. Just that the IDF has been at points remarkably opaque, demonstrating not only their nonchalance towards civilian casualties, but also their unwillingness to be critically examined for their behavior.
100 people were butchered that day, more than 5,500 maimed, and some 240 hostages abducted, including infants, entire families, persons with disabilities, and Holocaust survivors, some of whom have since been executed, many of whom have been tortured, sexually abused, and starved in captivity. Representatives of the hostages' families are in this courtroom today, and we acknowledge their presence and their boundless suffering. We know of the brutality of October 7th, not only from the harrowing testimonies of the survivors, the unmistakable proof of carnage and sadism left behind.
Vosh, I'm not nuts, right? Like, he's just saying what Hamas did, it's playing it's all Palestine. The mainstream argument from Zionists and from the State of Israel relies on the assumption that basically every Palestinian who dies there was in some way asking for it. They might not explicitly say that. They don't always say, like, everyone there is Hamas or whatever. That's, like, a rarity. But the implicit suggestion, at the very least, is like, well, by allowing yourself to be ruled by Hamas, you're sort of like, you kind of brought this on yourselves. That assumption is necessary in their defense, because you're not getting around, what is it now, 24,000 dead civilians without making a few arguments along the lines of, well, what if they asked for it, though? What if they asked me to? What if a Palestinian baby walked up to me and said, please shoot me? What if they did that, huh? Would that be a war? Would that be genocide? I don't think so. Your Honor, my case rests.
Forensic evidence taken at the scene. We know it because the assailants proudly filmed and broadcast their barbarism. The events of that day are all but ignored in the applicant's submissions, but we are compelled to share with the court some fraction of its horror. The largest calculated mass murder of Jews in a single day since the Holocaust. We do so not because these acts, however sadistic and systematic, release Israel of its obligations to uphold the law as it defends its citizens and territory. That is unquestionable. We do so because it is impossible to understand the armed conflict in Gaza without appreciating the nature of the threat that Israel is facing and the brutality and lawlessness of the armed force confronting it. In the volume of materials submitted to members of the court, access has been provided to a portion of the raw footage for separate screening. But I am obliged to put before the court today some small fragment of the scenes of unfathomable cruelty that took place in hundreds of locations on that horrible day. Johnny Simantov, a wheat farmer, and his wife Tamar, an activist for women's rights, lived in kibbutz near Oz. When the rocket fire started, they hid in the safe room with their 4-year-old son Omer and their 6-year-old twins Arbel and Shachar. During their rampage, Hamas militants set fire to their house. Johnny texted his sister.
Are they showing the snuff film they showed journalists? Probably not. My understand. Yeah, I got spoiled on this, but they're actually going to do. They're going to do that thing they did in Los Angeles, where they have a woman dress up as that one woman who got captured and probably by Hamas. And they're going to like patrol her around by 2 guys who are in like Hamas costumes or whatever. The doors are going to open and they're going to be like, what's going on? And there's going to be like the rest of the Israeli legal team is going to be the guys. Here, let me see if I can find that. Los Angeles Hamas victim performance? What would I even call that? Like what? Hamas kidnappee? Hostage? Victim TikTok? I can't find it. If you saw it, you saw it. Crisis actor? No, it's a crisis actor. It's just a stupid show they did. Performance. Demonstration.
Nay. They're here. They're burning us. We're suffocating. The whole family was burned alive to ashes, making DNA identification especially difficult. A survivor of the Nova Music Festival massacre testified to police to witnessing a Hamas militant brutally raping a young woman, as another militant cut off her breast and toyed with it. A second militant then raped her again, shooting her in the head while still inside her.
So, purely from a rhetorical standpoint, notice how this still has literally nothing to do with the claim. What Israel would be doing if they were interested in actually engaging with the legal facts of the matter would be arguing that their military tactics don't constitute genocide. What he's doing is talking about the most salacious, aggressively over-the-top, cutting off their breast. Yeah, like, okay, this would be like if the first 30 minutes of the South African presentation had been like, the Palestinian child was pulled from the wreckage, but the bones and sinew snapped and their arms came off and blood got, like, they're past the point you're no longer setting a scene and you're instead just like, it's gore porn. This is this is revolting, frankly. It's revolting both on an ethical and like I guess material sensory, it's holistically revolting, and it's not an argument.
In one video recorded by a home surveillance system, a Hamas militant throws a grenade into a safe room where a father and his 2 sons have rushed to hide. The father is killed. The 2 sons are injured and bleeding as a militant pulls them into the living room. One child can be heard screaming to his brother.
He's not arguing against the definition of genocide. He's trying to justify it. Exactly, yes. The only purpose of this is to go, we are allowed to kill as many civilians as we want because these bad things happen. That is their argument. That is like explicitly what is being laid out here. Not to mention the fact that on Twitter, the Israeli government just flatly said they will not respect any orders from The Hague. Like they won't be stopped by The Hague. So, like, why, you know, like it's pretty plain from the get-go. They just don't care about or respect this this trial.
Why am I alive? I can't see anything. They're going to kill us. The militant casually opens the fridge, takes out a bottle and drinks. And then there is this recording from kibbutz Mefalsim.
That open was... I'm sorry, the idea of a Hamas militant still having to do the thing where they're like, no, I can't send images over SMS. Open the app. You can get rid of the call app and then you can open the WhatsApp app at the same time. I sent you pictures. They're coming through.
As stated, none of these atrocities absolve Israel of its obligations under the law.
I remember this recording. They cut off the part where the fighter's father shows disapproval to the call. Is that true? Does the father say, "Son, you shouldn't have killed her," or something like that? I haven't heard that call myself. Yeah, he does. Oh, Okay. All right. Maybe that seems relevant. I don't know. I mean, the only purpose of all of this is to like legitimize the genocide anyway.
But they do enable the court to appreciate three core aspects of the present proceedings, which the applicant has obscured from view. First, that if there
the Israelis did that too. Oh, that's true. Sorry, there were people who were like pantomiming bombed, killed Palestinians. It was just Zionists on TikTok making fun of them. They would paint themselves having like monobrows and put like dust from plaster and concrete on their face to simulate them just getting bombed out. And they would do those like Pallywood skits where they were like, all these Palestinians are faking being bombed by us. And they'd black out the teeth and make them look like, you know, Hicks or whatever. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, okay. So they are doing that for Palestinians too.
Been acts that may be characterized as genocidal, then they have been perpetrated against Israel.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a concern about the obligations of states under the Genocide Convention, then it is in relation to their responsibilities to act against Hamas's proudly declared agenda of annihilation, which is not a secret and is not in doubt.
Why haven't more nations come forward to nuke Gaza? Why aren't we getting more support? We've already gotten hundreds of billions in military assistance from America, but that's not enough. We need more. We need everyone. Nuke Gaza.
The annihilationist language of Hamas's charter is repeated regularly by its leaders, with the goal, in the words of one member of Hamas's political bureau, of the cleansing of Palestine of the
example, if you want. Yeah, I think, do you think like Israelis' legal defense team should have just been like these influencers? They could, on one hand, you could have the like hostage lady being marched through LA, and the other hand, you have these guys, and they can just point at these two and be like, who do you sympathize with? This white passing woman who Hamas attacked, maybe, or whatever? Like, because, you know, we're just like randomly pantomiming it, or like these guys with their monobrows. Jeez, what a shitty monobrow. Come on, at least try. I'm sorry, if we interrupt ourselves every like 8 seconds to continue reminding ourselves that Zionists are evil, we're going to be here forever. So I'm just going to focus on the video from now on. I'm going to focus on the video now.
Filth of the Jews. It is expressed no less chillingly in the words of senior Hamas member Razi Hamad to Lebanese television
Unibrow,
on October 24th, 2023, who refers to the October 7th attacks, what Hamas calls the Al-Aqsa flood, as follows.
This guy looks like AI.
In the continuation of this interview, Hamad is asked, does that mean the annihilation of Israel? Yes, of course, he says. The existence of Israel is illogical. And then he says, nobody should blame us for the things we do. On October 7th, October 10th, October 1 millionth, everything we do is justified. End quote. Given that on October 7th, before any military response by Israel, South Africa issued an official statement blaming Israel for, quote, the recent conflagration, essentially blaming Israel for the
How many minutes in until he talks about the actions of Israel? 190 minutes and 22 seconds. He'll eventually get to talking about the stuff that Israel's done.
Of its own citizens. One wonders whether the applicant agrees. Second, it is in response to the slaughter of October 7th, which Hamas openly vows to repeat, and to the ongoing attacks against it from Gaza, that Israel has the inherent right to take all legitimate measures to defend its citizens and secure the release of the hostages. This right is also not in doubt. It has been acknowledged by states across the world. Astonishingly, the court has been requesting...
This fuck. Me too. Dude's on his iPad. He's playing Fruit Ninja.
To indicate a provisional measure calling on Israel to suspend its military operations. But this amounts to an attempt to deny Israel its ability to meet its obligations to the defense of its citizens, to the hostages, and to over 110,000 internally displaced Israelis unable to safely return to their homes. The applicant in its submissions to the court makes almost no mention of the ongoing humanitarian suffering of Israel's citizens at the hands of Hamas, and treats the hostages still held in captivity as barely an afterthought. But is there a reason these people on your screen are unworthy of protection?
Anyone got a bingo on this one? Literally like, oh, you think we've done genocide, have you? Well, have you considered we're protecting this 4-pixel baby photo? Have you Hamas robbed the rest of the pixels in this image? This image used to be a clean, crisp 1080p, and now you can't even make out the eyes properly. Did Hamas steal the pixels? This is who you're picking on when you accuse me of genocide, by the way, not that you care. Oh my god. Did anyone there's that's the lady that they did the LA walk around with. That's what they were doing. They were doing a specific girl, by the way. You know, this girl, if she's still alive, I don't know where she is currently, but like that specific girl, you know, walking around. Oh, that's why they were low res, because you were showing the little, it's called artistic vision. Why is the vertical gap smaller than the horizontal gap? Oh, that bothers me. See? Genocidal editing. Hamas did that. They stole the spacing.
Hamas is not a party to these proceedings. The applicant, by its request, seeks to thwart Israel's inherent right to defend itself, to let Hamas not just get away with its murder, literally, but render Israel defenseless as Hamas continues to commit it. Yesterday, counsel for the applicant made the astonishing claim that Israel was denied this right.
I can't believe Hamas is still committing a genocide. That's crazy. I hadn't heard about that. That's wild. No, again, we're 18 minutes in, and not once he said anything even remotely like, we have been bombing responsibly, or we have been targeting, like Hamas, you know, targets or whatever, or we have engaged ethically. And like, he's not even pretending to make any of those arguments. He's literally just saying like, no, they deserve to die, and we deserve to do whatever we want because the Holocaust happened and October 7th happened, and look at this photo of a baby.
And as a matter of fact, should not be able to protect itself from Hamas's attacks. But allow me to draw attention to these words written by Professor Vaughan Lowe. Quote, "The source of the attack, whether a state or non-state actor, is irrelevant to the existence of the right to defense. Force may be used to avert a threat because no one and no state is obliged by law passively to suffer the delivery of an attack." Israel agrees with these words, as I suspect would any sovereign state.
Again, none of it, this has, again, nothing to do with the claim. This is just arguing you can defend yourself. That's not, the claim isn't that Israel can't defend itself. The South African prosecuting group literally said, like, we're not against the concept defending itself. You know, like, it's nothing. It's just waffling. It's all grandstanding, yeah. Israel has no intention of abiding by any decision made here. They won't respect it. If the ICJ comes down on them, they'll just say it's because the ICJ is Hamas, ISIS, Hamas, anti-Semites, whatever. They're only here to put up a pantomime. They're essentially using this for propagandizing. The problem is their case is so bad that they can't even, like, much is the case as we've seen previously in the past few months, they can't propagandize very well.
If the claim of the applicant now is that in the armed conflict between Israel and Hamas, Israel must be denied the ability to defend its citizens, then the absurd upshot of South Africa's argument is this. Under the guise of the allegation against Israel of genocide, this court is asked to call for an end to operations against the ongoing attacks of an organization that pursues an actual genocidal agenda, an organization that has violated every past ceasefire and used it to rearm and plan new atrocities, an organization that declares its unequivocal resolve to advance its genocidal plans.
Oh, I'm sorry to those who wanted to see it, but Israel calling South Africa of being the legal arm of Hamas, that doesn't happen in The Hague itself. That happens in a press release following South Africa's presentation at the ICJ. So I know a lot of you wanted to hear that being said by this guy. But no, they said that in a press release. No, he says it. Wait, does he say it and the press release said it? He'll imply it? Did he say it too? Because we're not going to watch the whole damn thing. No, not in so many words. Huh?
That is an unconscionable request, and it is respectfully submitted that it cannot stand. Third, the court is informed of the events of October 7th because if there are any provisional measures that should appropriately be indicated here, they are indeed with respect to South Africa. It is a matter of public record that South Africa enjoys close relations with Hamas, despite its formal...
Never mind. Pardon me. My apologies for misleading the fine people of my audience. You know, I really did you dirty there. Anyone get a bingo? Bingo on that one? Anyone? Okay.
Recognition as a terrorist organization by numerous states across the world. These relations have continued unabated even after the October 7th atrocities. South Africa has long hosted and celebrated its ties with Hamas figures, including a senior Hamas delegation that, incredibly, visited the country for a, quote, solidarity gathering just weeks after the massacre. In justifying instituting proceedings, South Africa makes much of its obligations under the Genocide Convention. It seems fitting, then, that it be instructed to comply with those obligations itself, to end its own language of delegitimization of Israel's existence, end its support for Hamas, and use its influence with this organization so that Hamas permanently ends its campaign of genocidal terror and releases the hostages. Madam President, members of the court, the hostilities between Israel and Hamas...
just to let you guys know, you can't do a crime, but then say, like, we'll stop doing the crime if the other guy stops doing the crime first. That's not actually a legal defense. You can't be like, oh, okay, well, we'll stop it when we'll tell Hamas to stop, and we'll stop. That's not actually how it works.
Have exacted a terrible toll on both Israelis and Palestinians. But any genuine effort to understand the cause of this toll must take account of the horrendous reality created by Hamas within the Gaza Strip. When Israel withdrew all its soldiers and civilians from Gaza in 2005, it left a coastal area with a potential to become a political and economic success story. Hamas's violent takeover in 2007 changed all that. Over the past 16 years of its rule, Hamas has smuggled countless weapons into Gaza and has diverted billions in international aid, not to build schools, hospitals, or shelters to protect its population from the dangers of the attacks it launched against Israel over many years, but rather to turn massive swaths of the civilian infrastructure into perhaps the most sophisticated terrorist stronghold in the history of urban warfare. Remarkably, counsel for the applicant described the suffering in Gaza as unparalleled and unprecedented, as if they are unaware of the utter devastation wrought in wars that have raged just in recent years around the world. Sadly, the civilian suffering in warfare is not unique to Gaza. What is actually unparalleled and unprecedented is the degree to which Hamas has entrenched itself within the civilian population and made Palestinian civilian suffering an integral part of its strategy. Hamas has systematically and unlawfully embedded its military operations, militants and assets throughout Gaza, within and beneath densely populated civilian areas. It has built an extensive warren of underground tunnels.
So, okay, it took us like 22 minutes, but we finally arrived at something relevant to the actual claims made against Israel here. Essentially the argument of, okay, well, we have no choice. Now, that is an argument. It's a bad one, but that is an argument. At least now we are talking about something relevant to the claims made.
For its leaders and fighters, several hundred miles in length, throughout the Strip, with thousands of access points and terrorist hubs located in homes, mosques, UN facilities, schools.
UN facilities, inside the skulls of children. Just remembering when, you know, they went after Al-Shafa Hospital and they were like, this is the epicenter of Hamas control. This is like the thriving brain network of Hamas. And they take it and there are people in there dying from all the bombs they've dropped in it. The only tunnels they can find are the ones they dug decades ago. And then they're like, actually, the epicenter of Hamas control is from this hospital down south, you know? Yeah. Yeah, they didn't even find the Red Barrel Room. Where was the Red Barrel Room?
And perhaps most shockingly, hospitals. This is not an occasional tactic. It is an integrated, pre-planned, extensive and abhorrent method of warfare. Purposely and methodically murdering civilians, firing rockets indiscriminately, systematically using civilians, sensitive sites and civilian objects as shields, stealing and hoarding humanitarian supplies, allowing those under its control to suffer so that it can fuel its fighters and terrorist campaign. The appalling suffering of civilians, both Israeli and Palestinian, is first and foremost the result of this despicable strategy. The horrible cost of Hamas not only failing to protect its civilians, but...
Dude, I'm browsing Twitter and I saw an image of Juniper making Mike's Hard Lemonade with a bunch of salt in the rim of the glass, and now I want it so badly. I need to get like a big, like, margarita salt thing. Yeah, has anyone had the you know what I'm talking about, like the Black Rock salt? You get it with the tequilas that they have. I forget what they're called. They have like a smoky, like Moscato. Is that what it's called? Mezcal. Yeah. And you have it with like the Black Rock like salt that has like that charcoaly taste to it. So good, man. Ooh.
Actively sacrificing them for its own propaganda and military benefit. And if Hamas abandons this strategy, releases the hostages, lays down its arms, the hostilities and suffering would end.
This shit. That's what I'm talking about. Ooh.
There are many distortions in the applicant's submission to the court, but as shall be demonstrated by counsel, there is one that overshadows them all.
Vosh, pay attention to that
in
fucking
the applicant's
retard.
telling, it is almost as if there is no intensive armed conflict taking place between two parties at all. No grave threat to Israel and its citizens.
Passion? I'll look it up.
Only an Israeli assault on Gaza. The court is told of widespread damage to buildings, but it is not told, for example, how many thousands of those buildings were destroyed because they were booby-trapped by Hamas. How many became legitimate targets because of the strategy of using civilian objects and protected sites for military purposes. How many buildings were struck by over 2,000 indiscriminate terrorist rockets that misfired and landed in Gaza itself. The court is told of over 23,000 casualties.
They killed themselves. They all bombed themselves. Actually, Israel hasn't killed a single Palestinian. It's all just been, yeah. Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself.
As the applicant repeats, as many have, unverified statistics provided by Hamas itself, hardly a reliable source. Every civilian casualty in this conflict is a human tragedy that demands...
Palestinians just kind of do that. Yeah, Palestinians just blow up sometimes. It's been known to happen. Yeah, so we have Hamas is lying about the death count, but also, like, they are probably firing rockets at themselves, those dumb idiots. You know, look at all the unibrows they have and all of our TikToks about them. But also, we have no choice but to bomb them the way we do because of all the way that there are Hamas agents hidden inside the skulls of every child in the Gaza Strip, you know?
Demands our compassion. But the court is not told how many thousands of casualties are in fact militants, how many were killed by Hamas fire, how many were civilians taking direct part in hostilities, and just how many are the result of legitimate and proportionate use of force against military targets, even if tragic. And the court is also told of the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza.
Again, I think it's incredibly telling that as willing as the IDF and Israel are to put out propaganda, we have yet to see this, like, big wave of videos of them fighting in the streets of Gaza and, like, taking it block by block or whatever. You'd think they'd be taking, like, body cam videos of them firing against Hamas insurgents and, like, getting a kill, or, like, they go in there and they see, like, you know, like, there's so much shit. All of the weird propaganda we see is after Hamas is long gone and they're just, like, looting or blowing up the remains of the city they're destroying, you know? No, those videos are around. No. Okay, let me be clear. I'm not saying there are no videos of them fighting. I'm saying, where's the propaganda? You know? All the propaganda that Israel puts out from the ruins of Gaza is like, look, we found this mysteriously fully charged iPad that has Hitler's the screen, you know, when you turn it on. But you'd think you'd get way more. Like, think about it compared to Ukraine. Have you guys not seen like a metric ton of pro-Ukrainian propaganda that has incorporated them fighting? Because I've seen that shit so many times. I don't know. I think it's very interesting, especially given how disingenuous the IDF has been with its propaganda, that we're not seeing more of that pushed like more aggressively.
But it is not told of Hamas's practice of stealing and hoarding aid. It is not told of the extensive Israeli efforts to mitigate civilian harm, of the humanitarian initiatives being undertaken to enable the flow of supplies and provide medical attention to the wounded. The applicant purports to describe the reality in Gaza, but it is as if Hamas and its total contempt for civilian life just do not exist as a direct cause of that reality. Hamas is widely estimated to have over 30,000 fighters and is known to bring minors no older than 15 or 16 into its ranks. They are coming for us. But in South Africa's telling, they have all but disappeared. There are no explosives in mosques and schools and children's bedrooms, no ambulances used to transport fighters, no tunnels.
Are they literally trying to say they've only killed Hamas militants? Basically, yeah. But the reason why I was making that point earlier is that, like, even the IDF has made essentially no effort to give us the impression that Hamas is present in the areas they're fighting for. Like, they did a bunch of videos of them rounding up shirtless men at gunpoint and like holding them in pits. But then you look closely and a lot of those guys are civilians, you know? Like a lot, they're like faked propaganda videos. We saw that weird clip of somebody putting their clothes back on after it looked like they were being escorted. Again, I don't know. It's like there's very little. I genuinely, like, I have not been given a strong impression of Hamas presence in the Gaza Strip. I know they exist out there somewhere, but like it's just the IDF has not done a good job to dispel the impression that they're just shelling like the civilians, you know?
Terrorist hubs under sensitive sites, no fighters dressed as civilians, no commandeering of aid trucks, no firing from civilian homes, UN facilities, and even safe zones. There is only Israel acting in Gaza. The applicant is essentially asking the court to substitute the lens of armed conflict between a state and a lawless terrorist organization with the lens of a so-called genocide of a state against a civilian population. But it is not offering the court a lens. It is offering it a blindfold. Madam President, members of the court, the nightmarish environment created by Hamas has been concealed by the applicant, but it is the environment in which Israel is compelled to operate. Israel is committed, as it must be, to comply with the law, but it does so in the face of Hamas's utter contempt for the law. It is committed, as it must be, to demonstrate humanity, but it does so in the face of Hamas's utter inhumanity. As will be presented by counsel, these commitments are a matter of express government policy, military directives and procedures. They are also an expression of Israel's core values. And, as shall also be shown, they are matched by genuine measures on the ground to mitigate civilian harm under the unprecedented and excruciating conditions of warfare created by Hamas. It is plainly inconceivable, under the terms set by this very court, that a state conducting itself in this way, in these circumstances.
Not to be soy, but Israel's obsession with a fictitious version of Hamas very much reminds me of Oceania's obsession with the Trotsky stand-in guy. Well, I mean, it's a common obsession with fascist governments in general. Fascists have a very tough time convincing other people and themselves that what they're doing is justified unless they constantly remind you of the ever-present threat of a internal and external enemy. In their case, Hamas gets to be both, because even though the Gaza Strip is a part of Israel, Israel treats it essentially like a separate country in a lot of ways, certainly like culturally and like militarily. but also they can treat Hamas as an internal enemy because they're, right there and they're in the country and, the Palestinians. So, it serves their interest. That is usually like the justifying mechanism. No fascist government gets very far in perceived peacetime. There's always a crisis that has to be responded to. Nobody would sell their freedom away to a tyrant unless they felt it was necessary for some reason.
May be said to be engaged in genocide, not even prima facie. The key component of genocide, the intention to destroy a people in whole or in part, is totally lacking. What Israel seeks by operating in Gaza is not to destroy a people, but to protect the people, its people, who are under attack on multiple fronts, and to do so in accordance with the law, even as it faces a heartless enemy determined to use that very commitment against it. As will be detailed by Council, Israel's lawful aims in Gaza have been clearly and repeatedly articulated by its Prime Minister, its Defence Minister, and all members of the War Cabinet. As the Prime Minister reiterated yet again this week, Israel is fighting Hamas terrorists, not the civilian population. Israel aims to ensure that Gaza can never again be used as a launch pad for terrorism. As the Prime Minister reaffirms, Israel seeks neither to permanently occupy Gaza or to displace its civilian population. It wants to create...
Did South Africa bring up the West Bank? No, and it's not relevant to the argument that they're making. If South Africa wanted to make a genocide argument, which involved this like broader spanning... Keep in mind, I didn't see the entirety of their argument, but it's focused on the Gaza Strip. You could make a broader argument for genocidal intent by pointing out the treatment of Palestinians in the West Bank, though. I firmly believe that.
A better future for Israelis and Palestinians alike, where both can live in peace, thrive and prosper, and where the Palestinians permanently occupy Gaza or to displace its civilian population. It wants to create a better future for Israelis and Palestinians alike for terrorism. As the Prime Minister reaffirms, Israel seeks neither to permanently occupy Gaza or to displace its civilian population. It wants to create a better future for Israelis and Palestinians alike, where both can live in peace, thrive and prosper, and where the Palestinian people have all the power to govern themselves, but not the capacity to threaten Israel. If there is a threat to that vision...
These goals are mutually exclusive. Netanyahu has explicitly said he doesn't want any two-state solution. How could Palestinians govern themselves? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't track, Yeah, people have linked this, but Israel's been making an effort to cut Gaza off from Egypt. I wonder, at some point this has to break or a bunch of people are going to starve to death. As I understand it, like a lot of Palestinians are barely even getting enough water to drink, at this point. I don't know. Is it possible he's fibbing? This guy, a lawyer defending a fascist state against charges of genocide at The Hague, lying? Nah.
If there is a humanitarian threat to the Palestinian civilians of Gaza, it stems primarily from the fact that they have lived under the control of a genocidal terrorist organization that has total disregard for their life and well-being. That organization, Hamas, and its sponsors seek to deny Israel, Palestinians, and Arab states across the region the ability to advance a common future of peace, coexistence, security, and prosperity. Israel is in a war of defense against Hamas, not against the Palestinian people, to ensure that they do not succeed. In these circumstances, there can hardly be a charge more false and more malevolent than the allegation against Israel of genocide. The applicant has regrettably engaged in a transparent attempt to abuse the Convention's compulsory jurisdiction mechanism, and in particular, the provisional measures phase of proceedings, to bring under the purview of the court matters over which, in truth, it lacks jurisdiction. Madam...
South Africa is abusing the system that gives it jurisdiction in a situation where it doesn't have jurisdiction? How does that work? South Africa is dishonestly taking advantage of the fact that they can do this by doing this. What?
President, members of the court,
international
the Genocide
law
Convention was a solemn promise made to the Jewish people and to all peoples of never again. The applicant, in effect, invites the court to betray that promise. If the term genocide can be so diminished in the way that it advocates, if provisional measures can be triggered in the way that it suggests, the Convention becomes an aggressor's charter. It will reward, indeed encourage, the terrorists who hide behind civilians at the expense of the states seeking to defend against them. To maintain the integrity of the Genocide Convention,
Hang now.
to maintain its promise, and the Court's own role as its guardian, it is respectfully submitted that the application and request should be dismissed for what they are, a libel, designed to deny...
Just call blood libel, dude. F it, why not? You've already hit every other goddamn mark in the bingo sheet. Just do it, yeah. This whole thing is bullshit, and we shouldn't even be here. Also, it's anti-Semitic. Yeah, just do it.
Israel the right to defend itself according to the law from the unprecedented terrorist onslaught it continues to face, and to free the 136 hostages Hamas still holds. I thank you for your kind attention. May I ask, Madam President, that you call Professor Shaw to the podium.
I thank the co-agent of Israel for his statement.
I
now
don't.
invite Professor Malcolm Shaw to take the floor. You have the floor, Professor Shaw.
Madam President and members of the Court, it is a great honour to appear before you again, and a privilege.
Oh yeah, this is Malcolm Shaw, not the other guy. When I said the other guy is Malcolm Shaw, I'm stupid. That guy also sounded British. I think the whole team is British, isn't it? This guy's the British guy. If you couldn't tell, in case you were wondering, this is Thomas Balfour. Is it? I don't think it is. No, this is Thomas Shaw. Or not Thomas Shaw, Malcolm Shaw. God damn it. That was a joke? Why would you joke? I'm stupid enough as it is. You robbed me of more brain cells. God, this looks stupid.
Here on behalf of the State of Israel. It is my task today to address the issues falling within the general categories of prima facie jurisdiction and the preservation of alleged rights sought to be protected. However, I would like first to make a preliminary comment about the key question of context, which constitutes the framework for the consideration of this request for the grant of provisional measures.
I don't know if I even care, to be honest. This guy's going to actually get into the legals of it, and I understand. How is he even going to approach this? I don't want to listen to anything from a guy in a wig.
Real consequence. This is not the normal understanding of such notes and their importance in international relations, but he says this for a reason, as we shall see. South Africa instituted proceedings against Israel on the 29th of December. In this long recital, the application notes that on the 21st of December, South Africa sent a note verbal to Israel, raising its concerns about genocide.
Why are none of them Israeli? Well, again, my guess is that this is just being used as like a show trial. They're just trying to like placate and buy time and mostly try to like not earn the total ire of Western audiences because the West is the one that supports them primarily. So they've sent a bunch of Brits over. Also, considering the fact that Britain is a dying empire, it makes sense there'd be a bunch of lawyers over there just jumping at the bit to defend genocide on the behalf of a fascist colonial apartheid state. There's probably a bunch of people who, wanted the chance to defend Rhodesia back when that was on the table, and now they're going for this one. The first guy was Australian, not British. Oh, you think I care about the difference? Come on.
The application further states that Israel has not responded directly to South Africa's note verbal.
Holy sh! I could not. I couldn't listen to this guy. Look, you can watch it on YouTube if you want.
Difficult in such.
I dare say, my dear chum, I seem to have misplaced my genocide argument in my silly wig. Let me go searching for it. I can't do it.
This is particularly difficult in such an egregious matter as an allegation of genocide. Were understood by the... Excuse me. Right, I've lost a page.
Argument lost. Argument lost. It's over. It's over. Here, you know what? I'm just going to read the summary. I don't give a shit. I'm just reading the summary. You can watch it online if you want to. I'm not listening to this shit. I'm not doing it. Also, it's past stream end time, and there were other things I wanted to go over. We're just going to read the Israeli government position from the Wikipedia. I don't respect these people. Jesus. Israel rejected the allegations with disgust and accused South Africa of cooperating with a terrorist organization that is calling for destruction of the state of Israel. They described the actions of South Africa as blood libel, there you go, and claimed that the proceedings were abetting the modern heirs of the Nazis. Bingo. It's from Netanyahu. Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Here we go. The Israeli legal team, led by British jurist Malcolm Shaw, that's the Whig dipshit, argued that Israel did not possess the special intent required for the crime of genocide. Shaw contended that the South African case provided only a partial narrative and asserted that the UN's highest court lacked jurisdiction over the Gaza war, a matter awaiting the judge's response. So this is him saying literally like, yeah, I know there's direct precedent of this being their jurisdiction, but I say it's not. So the court has to respond to that. According to Haaretz, what allowed South Africa to present their case was not actually the events of the war, but instead incendiary comments made by certain members of the current Israeli government coalition. Shaw invited the court to consider the decisions of the Israeli cabinets instead of focusing on, quote, random statements made by politicians who are not decision makers. So essentially his argument was, hey, we shouldn't even be here, and also, how dare you look at the direct statements of our military and political leaders as a way of determining their intentions. He is literally simultaneously arguing that Israel does not have the intent required for the crime of genocide, but also saying you shouldn't look at intent from statements made by politicians. Like, prove intent, but also don't look at statements from the people. Also, we're not supposed to be here, even though the last genocide case proved that they have the jurisdiction to bring this against us. Not even disputing the actions of genocide. Nope, it's a stupid technicality. This is the same guy who defended Serbia in court in its genocide case against Kosovo. I would need to look into it. I saw people saying that, but I couldn't find any like direct links. Anyway, I guess the takeaway from this is that Zionists are evil, Malcolm Shaw is evil, people who wear powdered wigs are evil, and all glory to South Africa, you know, in their, you know, ongoing people's war against the crimes of Israel. He's also straight up lying about them not being decision makers. Yeah. I mean, he has to lie. He's on trial for genocide for Israel. So, yeah. Horrible, horrible people. Wretched monsters. A lot of them.